Here at Today, you really can do it all. You get a front row seat to history, you get to interview newsmakers, you get to cook. It really is just a candy shop for journalists.
Here at CNBC, you can live up to your potential.
Here at MSNBC, you can see every day how your work makes a difference.
Here at MSNBC on Peacock, we're streaming the same news and analysis you love on your terms.
Here at NBC News, you could have the opportunity to cover some of the most important global stories from the field as they happen for one of the most respected media outlets in the world.
Here at NBC News, we'll bring you to the front lines of some of the most pressing issues of our times, like climate change.
At NBC Nightly News, you can cover and travel the world and witness history in the making.
Here at NBC News Now, you can reach people wherever they are, however they're watching, whenever they're watching, and get involved now with what the future of news looks like.
Here at Telemundo, you are our priority. We work for you. We inform and empower you en español. Las cosas como son, telling it like it is.
Here at NBC Local, WCAU in Philadelphia.
Here at MSNBC.
Here at NBC News.
Today,
NBC News Now, you can create the future.
Hey everyone, I'm so pleased that you're able to join us this morning for the first NBCU Academy Next Level Summit. Nearly 2 years ago, we announced that one of our highest priorities is building teams that reflect the broadly diverse audiences that we serve as the nation's most viewed news organization. To achieve that aspiration, we created the 50% Challenge Initiative. It's based on the simple metric that over time, we want 1 of every 2 NBC Universal News Group team members to be a person of color and 1 of every 2 to be a woman. The NBCU Academy is a vital component of that strategy. The Academy launched just over a year ago and is rapidly developing into a new on-ramp for journalists from communities that have been historically underrepresented in America's newsrooms. We are so proud of the Academy and its close collaboration with 30 institutions of higher learning as they prepare the next generation of journalists for the digital age. We have a rich agenda for today's summit. Over the next few hours, you'll hear from leaders and journalists at NBC News, MSNBC, CNBC, and Telemundo. Their presentations include discussions about the latest innovations in our industry, combating disinformation, the increasingly important role of bilingual journalists, and how to position yourself for advancement in our industry. I want to thank all those journalists, and especially Yvette Miley and her team, for putting together such a great program. Thanks to their efforts, I know you will find today's summit to be informative and helpful. We are so grateful for all those leaders and journalists who are here today to speak with you. I'll be back a little later in the program for a fireside chat, but now, here's NBC News Now, and stay tuned anchor, Savannah Sellers.
Hey everyone, I'm Savannah Sellers, and we are thrilled to have you here for NBCU Academy's first ever Next Level Summit. This is a live global virtual experience, and our #1 goal today is just to help you grow, learn, and engage with us. We have over 1,800 journalists and aspiring journalists registered to attend today. So whether you're a college student, someone just starting out in your journalism career, or someone with a few years of experience under your belt, we hope you'll walk away today with some meaningful advice on how to take your career to the next level. We have an exciting day planned for you, and here's how it's all going to unfold. NBC's Tom Llamas will interview the top leaders of our NBC Universal News Group. These are the decision makers. NBC News President Noah Oppenheim, MSNBC President Rashida Jones, CNBC Chairman Mark Hoffman, and Executive Vice President of News at Telemundo, Patsy Loris. Next, you'll have a choice of 3 45-minute virtual breakout sessions. For students and early career journalists, we'll have a panel moderated by CNBC's Shepard Smith on how to drive and thrive and land your first big job in news. What careers should you consider? If you're a journalist with more experience under your belt and you're interested in learning how to combat the problem of misinformation and disinformation, we're going to share some tricks of the trade in a panel on social news gathering, moderated by NBC News correspondent, Peacock, and Snapchat host, also my best friend, Gotti Schwartz. And if you're a journalist with mid-level or senior experience and want to know how to up your leadership game or land that big promotion, you won't want to miss our Next Level Leadership panel, moderated by Alicia Menendez, host of MSNBC's American Voices. We'll round out the day with an intimate and interactive conversation with Cesar Conde, moderated by NBC's Kristen Welker, CNBC's Dom Chu, MSNBC's Jose Diaz-Balart live in our Telemundo studios with a panel of students from one of NBCU's Academy's partner schools, Florida International University. Also moderating, NBC News Now correspondent Zincle Esamoah, who is right now with a group of students at NBCU Academy Partner School, Montclair State University in New Jersey. There they are. Both groups will get to ask NBCU's News Group Chairman Cesar Conde questions live. After Cesar's fireside chat, we invite you to join us in our virtual Career Expo rooms. You'll have the opportunity to come on camera and speak with newsroom leaders and recruiters from CNBC, Telemundo, Telemundo Local, NBC News, MSNBC, and NBC News Local about career opportunities and how to make yourself stand out from the competition. This is really your opportunity to put your best foot forward. So come armed with smart questions to ask our teams. So let's back up. What is NBCU Academy? NBCU Academy is what you get when you challenge the best journalists at the best news organization to educate and train journalists and provide access and opportunity to all future and current journalists, content creators, and media innovators from around the world. Since launching in January of 2021, NBCU Academy has committed, get this, more than $10 million in scholarships for students of color at colleges and universities across the country. We hope the students attending these schools will be the news leaders and journalists of the future and will one day contribute to the legacy of excellence here at NBC News, MSNBC, CNBC, and Telemundo.
Good morning. Welcome to Today.
We're following several major stories.
Let's get to the top headlines.
This is the news on CNBC.
Así vamos, un día a la vez.
It's now time to sound off.
Hey, I'm Kramer.
This is Stay Tuned on Snapchat.
More news now on the way.
Let's start breaking all this down.
We are living right now what kids are going to learn about in their high school history classes years and decades from now.
We have some stunning new findings about COVID-19.
The more stimulus you put in, maybe it's better for the economy, but it does cause higher prices for goods and services.
Let's zoom out a bit to our changing climate. What do we think that the new normal is going to be?
This is a neighborhood that was leveled by this fire.
There are so many ways to be an ally to a friend, a coworker, a neighbor.
We can't drive out racism with racism. We need to show compassion and understanding.
As a minority family here in South Lake, do you think that Carroll schools are a safe environment?
The 2022 midterms, the battle for Congress, and the fight for control of state houses.
We are talking elections in a battleground state.
Now, it may seem early in the year for this.
What does President Biden need to do tonight?
He needs to speak to heads and hearts.
A lot to break down, Chuck, so let's dive right in.
Sigue el proceso de confirmación de la jueza Ketanji Brown Jackson.
The first black woman ever nominated to the Supreme Court.
This is a big moment. It is history.
Democrats in both the House and the Senate are in a stalemate.
What kind of message do you think President Biden needs to send?
What appears to be a serious escalation in the January 6th investigation.
The world is watching, and the next generation is watching, and the politicians are watching over what you can get away with or not.
You say in your book you were worried about the peaceful transition of power. Didn't the American people deserve to know what you knew?
Prices are only going to go up. What tangible things can this administration do to address it now?
Do you think the investor class has to rethink its position on fossil fuels?
Can he, in effect, use the filibuster to keep you from claiming power as the majority leader?
1 year into this administration, why aren't we doing better in the fight against COVID?
Did Donald Trump reveal what the Republican Party is or change it?
What scenarios would you put American troops to rescue and get Americans out?
They're not. That's a world war.
We begin this hour with the military invasion that's currently unfolding.
Our NBC News crew heard explosions in the capital city of Kyiv.
People here are terrified.
Russia is picking off Ukraine's military facilities one after another.
This factory has gone from making kitchen pots to lethal items that'll ruin tires, ruin the bottom of the car.
This is what it looks and feels like to try to escape Ukraine.
I don't want to say goodbye.
Esta es una guerra que no perdona ni siquiera.
About 1,000 people are coming to this border crossing every day.
Now we're seeing devastation and just terrified people.
This is where you come during the air raid sirens?
What is it that we can do? What do they need?
We are right now, for a whole bunch of reasons, completely uncharted territory.
It's about time we pay closer attention.
All right, Richard, thanks to you and all our colleagues who are bringing these important stories.
The whole world is watching.
We are up to the challenge here.
Bringing the news to you is not only a job, it's an honor.
I mean, that pumps me up to work here, so hopefully you're excited to learn from us all. I'll see you in a little bit, but for now, let me hand it over to my colleague Tom Llamas, host of NBC News Now's Top Story.
Hey, Savannah, we are pumped up as well. Hey, everyone, welcome to our opening panel on reimagining journalism. Today, we're taking a closer look at how the news industry is changing and changing pretty fast. Aspiring and working journalists see how the rise of streaming, the growing digital space, and the prevalence of disinformation is changing the way we work every day. I want to bring in the top leaders right now from NBC News, MSNBC, CNBC, and Noticias Telemundo to talk about these changes and what they mean for the industry. These innovators will be sharing their insights on the journalism landscape today, where it's going, and how to position yourself to succeed. A lot of knowledge, a lot of power, a lot of expertise here. So let me get through with the introductions here. First up, Mark Hoffman, chairman of CNBC, Rashida Jones, president of MSNBC, Noah Oppenheim, president of NBC News, and of course, Patsy Loris, executive vice president of news for Noticias Telemundo. Thanks everyone for being here today and taking the time. Looking at this panel, I'm wondering who's running NBC News, MSNBC, and CNBC right now, Telemundo. I'm not sure. Mark, I'm going to start with you. We are in your house here at the CNBC facility in New Jersey, a beautiful facility. I was promised that if we did this, we'd each get Bitcoin in a gift bag. I'm still waiting for that.
Well, we'll see how you do.
Okay.
It's
all right.
possible.
Fair enough. I do want to start with you, though. I think when you look at poll after poll, the economy is at the top of voters' minds right now. And I think as a journalist, the complicated part is to explain inflation's going up, gas prices are going up, yet people are still spending. So do you feel the pressure to make sure we get it right during this time, right before the midterm elections?
Well, first of all, welcome to CNBC. We're sitting on the stage where the news with Shepard Smith is produced. And it's wonderful to have you. We're in 160 countries with our television signal, but this is the central nervous system of CNBC, so it's great to have everybody here. Well, your question is the right question. I would say, always feel the pressure to get it right. CNBC really is built for balance, and nothing needs to be more balanced, or nothing is more balanced than when a stock or a bond is traded. Someone's buying it at the exact time someone else is selling it. If CNBC was to line up on one side or the other, I think we would put our viewers and users in a very tough position, and ultimately we would not have much of a brand. So the brand is key, and information that is balanced and down the middle is really the service we feel like we need to provide. So yes, there is a unique economic phenomenon taking place at the moment, but there has been essentially every year or every other year for as long as I've been hanging around CNBC, and that's close to 20 years now.
Yeah, it's one of the powers of NBC News that we have CNBC as well for the expertise and the deep bench. Rashida, I want to turn now to Ukraine. You've been so busy, like all the newsroom leaders here, dealing with Ukraine, all the journalists covering that story. I'm curious, you're a 24/7 news network. What keeps you up at night? Because you have to keep all those viewers informed and yet also keep your team safe.
Sure, it's always going to be a balance. I think for us, there's the programming side of making sure our viewers are informed and our users are informed on whatever platform they're consuming us on, but then there's also the coverage piece. So Noah, my colleague at NBC, runs the news gathering team. They're up 24 hours to ensure that our teams on the ground are safe, secure, mentally, physically, and so partnering with kind of what we need for programming and what they're doing from a coverage standpoint, we all put people first. At the end of the day, and I like to remind my teams as they're considering the resources available or working with the teams on how things get covered, remember, these are your colleagues who have husbands and wives to go home to, they have children to go home to, their parents want to see them, and so we can't do anything from a programming side to put any of that in jeopardy. And so, again, partnering with the team that runs the engine of making sure we're where we need to be editorially, but we're also safe and secure is the way to do that. But you've got to put people first. And then the other piece of it is by being part of a big organization like that, we all get to lean on each other, whether it's utilizing the resources with Sky News, and they've even powered some of our coverage overnight. We've used a lot of their content and reporting, some of our Telemundo colleagues who have been on the ground, and then obviously working closely with the NBC News folks as well. We just have to do it through a lens of people first.
And I'm glad you highlighted Sky because it shows the reach that NBC News has, which is really is unmatched. Noah, take us into the control room, take us into the conference rooms, right, when those tough decisions are being made. What has been the biggest challenge, you think, with this war?
Well, I think the biggest challenge with this war is that in theaters where we have operated historically, there has been a friendly military presence that we could rely upon in the worst case scenarios where we needed help. Many of us in these conference rooms now, on these calls now, we all came up together covering the conflicts in the Middle East, the war in Iraq, Afghanistan. So that's a huge advantage in that we've all been doing this in some form or another for going on 20 years now, unfortunately. What was different in those cases was that there was an American military presence. Here we're in uncharted territory. When we're inside Ukraine, we can't rely on the Ukrainian military, obviously. It's a fast-moving situation. But Rashida hit the nail on the head, which is it is all about the people. These are folks who we have deep personal relationships with, deep personal histories with. Their well-being is always going to be our first priority. But a close second is our obligation to keep the world informed. And it's conflicts like this and stories like this that motivated many of us to get into journalism in the first place. The opportunity to sort of shine a light in those dark corners of the world. So it's very motivating. The people who are on the ground there want to be there. I mean, it's to state the obvious, these are volunteer-only assignments. Richard Engel wants to be there. We're going to have to drag him out, kicking and screaming, when it's time for him to take a break. This is why we do this, is to inform the world about these kinds of terrible situations.
Yeah, and having been over there for almost 2 weeks, I can tell you that the coordination, the teamwork between all the assets of NBC News has really been incredible. Patsy, I want to bring it back here to the U.S. for a moment and talk about the changing demographics. Every single day, the U.S. is changing. Noticias Telemundo, this is a big part of your story. What have you seen change over the last couple of years that has made your job either tougher or easier?
Yes, so the changing demographics are offering tremendous opportunities for innovation in news. We are an example of that, NBC and Telemundo News. Leading up to the 2020 elections, we kicked off the NBC Noticias Telemundo report, the first ever between both divisions, where bilingual reporters collaborated on the same story that airs in Spanish on Telemundo Noticias and in English on NBC News, and reaching our viewers in whichever language they speak, Spanish, English, or both. And we're the only news organization that can do this across all platforms.
Patsy, I had a chance to visit the Telemundo Center in Miami last week or 2 weeks ago. It's an incredible facility. We got an email on a question from Dianise Lopez Reyes. She's from Estrella TV, and she wanted to ask, basically, what are the key elements that you look for in a broadcast journalist?
I think what we look for the most is strong reporting and storytelling, skills that you can find compelling stories that inform and engage our audience.
Okay. Before we continue the conversation now, we are asking our attendees to please click on the poll tab on the right side of your screen to take our poll on leadership. We'll reveal the results of that poll later in our discussion. You can do that at any time. So we're going to continue the conversation now with Noah. Noah, we asked some students at our partner schools to submit video questions for all of you. We wanted to put you on the spot. Okay, we haven't vetted any of these questions.
Great.
Jessica Lopez from California State University is concerned about the state of American politics and journalists' role in reporting on it. Here's Jessica Lopez's question for you.
Noah, nearly 3/4 of Republicans say they don't believe that President Biden's victory was legitimate. And it doesn't seem to matter that several news organizations have stated that these claims are baseless. How can we better navigate these polarizing climates in a time where many journalists are seen as the enemy?
Well, that's a great question, Jessica. It is the question in many ways of our time. This crisis of credibility, this crisis of misinformation and disinformation, it's tearing apart the fabric of our politics, of our country. I don't think that's an overstatement. NBC News considers our mission to be nonpartisan, middle-of-the-road, objective journalism in the most old-school sense. I mean, to borrow Mark's framing in terms of balance, that's as critical to NBC News as it is to CNBC. we make a concerted effort each and every day to make sure that we are aggressively questioning politicians on both sides of the aisle, that we're looking for stories that speak to the entire country, not just one group or another. In the last few years, we've done a couple things. We've hired a ton of reporters who live out in the country. Traditionally, you would hire a reporter and you'd have them move to LA, New York, DC, one of the places where we had a big bureau or facility. Going back several years ago, we said, you know what, instead of doing that, let's hire folks from some of the best local newspapers, and instead of moving them to us, let's leave them in the communities in which they live, so that they can speak to those communities and they can report on those communities. And I think that that's one of the things that we can do to help restore our credibility in the eyes of our audience, is to live with our audience all over the country. And it's also to stay true to, again, those old school journalistic principles of balance and nonpartisanship.
Noah, I have a follow-up, which I don't even know if I'm allowed to do, but I'd like to follow up. What do you tell your teams, and whether they be, a mid-level manager, a top-level manager, or someone who's a production assistant?
Yeah.
How do they ignore the noise because the media is so under assault right now?
Yeah, I think you tell them to ignore the noise, right? I'm not sure that there's a magic answer to that. It's been a challenging few years in that respect, but I've always said, rather than let's not engage. The tit for tat of public statements is not particularly productive. I think sometimes it can make news executives feel great to issue some public proclamation. My approach and our approach has always been, no, just let's keep our heads down and do the work.
Yeah,
and let the work speak for itself.
If I could jump in, the noise is the right metaphor, and it's our role to find the signal in the noise, because if we find the signal, then we're doing our job.
Right. Yeah, you always want people talking about you, being part of the conversation. Rashida, this one was one of our pre-submitted questions from Lauren Fitching, a student at UNC Chapel Hill, who asks, in a culture of widespread media distrust, how can reporters work towards restoring trust with the public?
Sure. So my answer is going to be pretty similar to what both Mark and Noah said, in the sense of just doing the work. It is sometimes can be a distraction when you're worried about the perception or kind of the positioning of what we do. I think the only people who kind of live in this world are people who are passionate about it, who see it as a public service. There are going to be detractors. There are going to be distractions. And so, one, I think doing the work. Two, I think Noah's point about covering the world in the community through the lens of the fabric of communities across the country is really important. It's important for us as we want to give as accurate of a perspective of what's happening in the world, to cover it from those locations in different ways, and hearing from people directly, engaging with people directly, which is why our reporting is so important. But I think thinking through the lens of a reporter, you have to do the work. You have to talk to people. What you see on Twitter is not what the world thinks and what's important into the world. And I think getting out there is the best way to do that.
I'd throw in one more thing, too.
Yeah.
I think for folks who are going into this line of work, I think questioning your own biases is critically important.
It's a good exercise.
A great exercise, both through a DEI context, but also through a partisanship context, through a geographic context, right? We all live in bubbles of one kind or another. And I think our job as journalists is to question those bubbles as often as possible.
Yeah, we're going to circle back to that because I think diversity plays a role in that. But Patsy, I want to talk about, along this vein, about misinformation, disinformation. It happens also, obviously, in the Spanish language community as well. What have you told your newsroom? How do you guys tackle this?
Well, fighting misinformation is a huge deal for us. Spanish language misinformation has intensified in recent years, beginning with the 2020 elections and COVID and COVID vaccines. So we've launched several initiatives to combat misinformation. We launched Te Verifica, Te Verified. It's our own fact-checking tool. We've launched already a WhatsApp chat where our viewers and users can contact us to verify information and news. We've also partnered with the Poynter Institute for the Media Wise en Español program, offering media literacy tips and training to empower all Spanish-speaking adults to be able to spot misinformation online, including in the most popular social media platforms.
Okay. Patsy, on that note, though, how do you decide whether something sort of rises to the level of Noticia Telemundo, like something is said on Spanish language talk radio, say in Miami, and it's about maybe Joe Biden during the campaign, or it's something about immigration that may not be true? How do you decide whether to give it sort of light, to explain it, or to ignore it?
We just make sure we have all the facts. Once we collect all the facts and we checked everything out, that's when we publish.
Okay, Patsy, good for that. We also have a viewer question from someone in our audience. Amina asks, how does NBCU plan to lead the next generation of leaders in journalism? Mark, I'll start with you. How do you look for leaders in your newsroom?
Well, it depends. It depends which part of the newsroom, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, or. But you know, what I was thinking of on one of the earlier answers is, and I think Noah made the point that you got to really test your own bias. I would extend that to say you've got to complement your own weakness, and I think if we're really being honest with ourselves and try to understand what do I do pretty well and what do I not do pretty well, I think what you will find is that A players will try and recruit people that shore up their weaknesses, and I think that's a leading indicator of somebody who can lead, and whether it is them doing the work themselves to fortify their weaknesses, to grow muscle where they didn't have it, or whether it's aligning themselves with those who can do that in a team atmosphere. So there are fundamental skills, obviously, for behind the camera and in front of the camera, but also there's a culture at CNBC and in all these organizations, and it goes to making sure that people are not only driven, but are driven in a way that is consistent with the energy of the organization, which is a little obscure, but there is a in each one of our organizations, I think, there is a familial environment where people feel like we spend so much time in these positions doing so much work that the environment when you're at work needs to feel familial and open and engaging.
Yeah, Rashida, you know, I want to move back to diversity. How do you ensure that your newsrooms reflect the growing communities that you're covering? I'm a firm believer that in the stories you select, they will be diverse if your staff is diverse, right? It happens organically.
Right.
So how do you make sure you have both those leaders, but also all the worker bees, and to make sure that team is diverse and really covering America?
Yeah, no, I think the key way to do it is to make it a part of how you do business. I think, you know, Mark kind of talked about the culture of this organization and how, you know, we work so collegially together and as a family, and there's an openness and a welcoming to having different points of view. So I think that's critically important, but I think you also have to make it part of the operation. You know, NBCU Academy is an example of that. This was a program that started in January of last year where we said, we are going to make this a standalone part of how we do business. It's up to us to grow the pipeline. It's up to us to find the future leaders and cultivate them, and as early in the process as possible, find them, grow them, groom them, and then they eventually take these chairs that we're all in right now. And so I think through programs like that, I think the 50% challenge and making that as part of how we operate, Caesar talked about that a little bit in the beginning, where it's not an option, it is an expectation that our newsrooms better reflect the country that we're covering, the country that we live in. That's how you get the seats around the table to look more like the country. That's how the decision-making comes in. That's how the work that's done on camera and behind the camera better reflects the country that we're covering.
No, I'll not put you on the spot, but I'll ask you about this. I was somewhere else when that initiative was first announced, and I can tell you just, you know, being a journalist of color, hearing Caesar say this challenge for a giant news network, it was like, oh my God, this is incredible. As somebody who has to make that vision a reality, is it hard? Is it something you look forward to?
I think it's something we relish. I mean, I think it's something that we all embrace as being not only the right thing to do from a moral standpoint, but also from a business standpoint for all the reasons we've been talking about. I think it would be a dereliction of duty if we didn't pursue a goal like that. You know, NBCU Academy, again, as Rashida said, we built this specifically because, unfortunately, it's probably harder than it should be, right? We wish that there was this abundant pipeline of people who were beating down our doors to take these jobs. We've got to be more proactive about building that pipeline and making it a little bit easier for folks who might not have ready access to 30 Rockefeller Center to make sure that they get a foot in the door. So I think, you know, we've we've done a lot to improve that over the last couple years. In any hiring conversation, anytime we're looking to build a staff, this is obviously a filter that's front and center, something that we're thinking about. But again, I think that to have it any other way wouldn't really be an option.
Yeah, Pat. So people who may not be familiar with Noticias Telemundo, they may think, well, nearly everyone is going to be diverse. What's your challenge? And we were just talking about this. You also have to be diverse within the Hispanic community. It can't just be all Mexican American, all Puerto Rican, all Cuban American. You have to have the entire Latin American community behind you.
And yes, and we're all different in Latin America. We have over 20 Latin American countries, so they're all different, and we're all speaking a different Spanish too. One of the things I'm most proud is that we have an all-women leadership team in Noticias Telemundo, and our goal for our employees is, in front and behind the cameras, is to represent that diversity and tell the story of the Latino community. We're all diverse, but we're all the same too, and we have the same issues.
All right. So, Mark, NBCU Academy fellow Melvin Harris from our partner school, North Carolina A&T. Also, this just reminds me real quick, that was one of the smartest things NBCU did, partnering with schools all around the country, sort of getting out of a certain corridor of the U.S. where a lot of people were coming in, trickling into the newsrooms. Partnering with schools where there's big minority communities was so smart. Anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there. But they have a question for you, and he's interested in your career journey and what you learned along the way. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Mark. My name is Melvin Harris from North Carolina A&T. From holding many different leadership positions at different news stations, how's it been different being the chairman of CNBC?
Well, Melvin, thank you for the question. Each job is different and in some ways is the same. But to approach your question in a more macro way, and many of you are just starting out or early in your career. And I've tried to look at each job in a unique way. And I didn't look at it this way at the stage where you all are. It took me a number of jobs in many years. But if you think about your career as a chart, and there's two lines on the chart, and one is learning, so you've got a learning curve, and the other is adrenaline, an adrenaline curve. You have to get those lines in the right place. Adrenaline is how excited you are to do the job that you're doing. The learning curve is obviously, am I learning enough? Am I engaged? Am I furthering my ability to do more? If either of those two curves is too flat, you either got to improve your situation where you are or move on. If either of them are too vertical, then you're probably in some trouble, and you're going to have to either take a step back and do something that's slightly less challenging, or slow your motor down a little bit. But finding that sweet spot between learning and enjoyment, I think, is really the trick to having a great career.
You want to keep growing, definitely. We have an audience question for Rashida. Deirdre asks, what's your advice for a woman of color who dreams of working at MSNBC someday?
Sure. I would say go for it. If you talked about the universities that NBCU Academy supports. I think we're up to 30 universities now, primarily servicing students of color. One of my alma mater is one of those 30, Hampton University. And I think about, if I were charting the future and when I was at Hampton and what's possible and what would I need to get there, I think I would tell that version of myself, work hard, obviously, only do it if you're passionate. But I think one of the things that I kick myself to this day that I didn't think this way back then is go for the big job, go for the big swing, go for the big opportunity. Because I think, and Noah talked about this a little bit, sometimes in some of these smaller universities or universities that are less resourced or universities that don't have a built-in pipeline to bigger organizations, you don't think you can. You don't think you have the potential or the connections or the ability to work for a place like this. And I hope in some small way, even me being on this panel and sitting in this chair is proof that that's possible. And so what I would tell that leader is go for it. Like, put in the work, have a plan. I loved Mark's comparison about what was it? It was learning and then
learning and adrenaline.
I mean, when you said adrenaline, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm all adrenaline at this point. But you know, like you go into it with a plan, with an objective, but don't be afraid to go for the big job.
Yeah, do you remember the moment, if you can briefly, but that moment where it sort of switched for you, where you said, I can do this, I'm no longer maybe that, you know, young aspiring journalist who just came out of college to, I can actually run MSNBC one day?
I would say it wasn't quite that long ago. I was definitely closer to the now Rashida than the college Rashida.
Yeah.
I very clearly remember a conversation. Caesar mentioned Yvette Miley earlier in the introduction, where Yvette said that to me. And she's like, well, and it wasn't this job in particular. It was a couple jobs ago. But she said, like, why not? Like, why can't you do that job? Like, you can do the job, but you have to believe that you can do it. It's not just about tactically can you do it. Do you believe in your heart of hearts that you have the ability to compete on that level, to produce on that level, to perform on that level? And that was, I remember, again, very vividly sitting in her office having this conversation where I said, no, I can do the job. But it took me believing it. That took longer than me actually having the ability to do it.
Yeah. Noah, you've had an interesting career. You've been a television producer, an author, a screenwriter, a dancer. What are some? We weren't supposed to talk about that.
We need proof.
Noah, you take this. I think the essential thing here, the through line, is the storytelling. I mean, how do you bring that to your job every single day, along with the dance?
Especially during the ballet phase.
You're interpretive.
Very nimble as well. Yeah, I mean, interesting is a kind adjective. You could also say it's sort of a somewhat haphazard career path, a career path devoid of any strategy or forethought. I think the through line is storytelling. For better or worse, have never thought much about a path. I've always been driven primarily by passion in the moment for some kind of creative endeavor. So whether it was putting together a segment on the hardball sitting next to you back in the day in Secaucus, or having an idea of a movie in my head. And again, to Rashida's point about just believing in yourself, I'd never done anything in that world before. I literally went to a Barnes & Noble and bought a book, like How to Write a Screenplay. I was like, why not? You never know. But it's always been driven by a desire to tell stories and getting excited about those stories and having some faith and confidence, I guess, that things would work out in some way. And what I would say to folks who are watching now is that they are all of us are fortunate to live in a time when the barriers to storytelling have never been lower, right? All of us can, thanks to the technology in our pockets and the democratization of information through the internet, all of us can go out and tell stories, and the opportunity for those stories to get noticed and for you to get noticed have never been greater. So follow that passion, follow that spark.
Patsy, there's this thing that we've been covering over the last 2 years with the pandemic, the Great Resignation, and now we're hearing about the Great Regret, basically people switching jobs. You've switched jobs in your career. You've taken on bigger jobs over the years. What is it for you? How do you make the sort of the calculation when you know you're ready for that next step?
In my case, I've always thought that I need to do my job with a purpose and a reason. So I tell these students, you need to make your stories stand out. Make sure that you provoke some kind of emotion, whether it's happiness or sadness or kindness, compassion, pride, even anger, to inspire you to make change. That's what we're here for, so that you can make the difference. And that's what it's all about, because we all bring, we're all unique, and we all bring unique vision, and we all have a unique life experience. And that's what it's for, to inspire, inform, and connect with our audience.
Well said. Let's check in.
Mark,
go for it.
I just wanted to add this. So we're sitting at CNBC, so there's the old expression that greed is good. Yeah. But I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to use that ambition is good. And blind ambition, of course, is not good. But ambition is good. And following up on what Patsy said, I mean, if you are committed to doing your job well, but you have ambition to do more, if you're in the right workplace, then you should be able to do that. You should have mentors or leaders that you can go to that you can add time to your day and try to realize your ambition. That is a beautiful thing. That is what pushes our organizations ahead and essentially any other organization in any walk of life around the world.
Mentoring is so big. I always advise young journalists to try to find a mentor, right? Just so they can bounce ideas off and say, I'm going through this, did you go through that? And I also tell older journalists, always make sure you're helping someone because everyone got help at some point in this career. We want to check the results of our audience poll. We asked you all, what is the most important leadership characteristic? And the majority of you said integrity is the most important characteristic. Well, that's great. For students and young career professionals who have never worked in person in their lives, what would be your advice for navigating our new normal of hybrid or maybe even full return to office? And I want to open up this question to everyone on the panel. As someone who launched a new show, sort of during this work from home, work in the office phase, it can be challenging. It's not impossible. We've all done it, though. What would you tell people, though, and what kind of reality check should they be in for? Do you want people here, or it changes every day?
Well, it only changes if the health and safety of folks at CNBC and changes. I love having people here. There's an energy at CNBC here and in London and in Singapore and our bureaus all around the world, where when people are together, there's a great energy. And obviously what we've learned is that we can do a hell of a lot without all being in our various hubs in our various buildings. But there is an energy, especially for someone young in their career. The chance to do what I just said a minute ago, which is to do their job, but then to meet other people, to experience what other people do, to drop in on your boss or drop in on a colleague or drop in on somebody in another department. I think that's essential. And despite the fact that the world has probably been changed forever, and punching a clock and being there 5 days a week and is likely a thing of the past. But being together, I think, is extraordinarily important and of the highest quality to the youngest workers.
Rashida?
I would very much echo that. First, I'll just start with answering your question of do we want people back? As long as it is safe to do so, absolutely. I think our collaboration is at a different level, our camaraderie is at a different level, and our product is at a different level. I think for earlier career employees, I would use this time as an opportunity where, on any given day, we've got a percentage of our teams in, meaning a percentage of our team is working from home. It just gives you more opportunity and more access. I will tell you, there were some employees in our newsroom who came in throughout the pandemic. There's one that I'm thinking about right now, Camille. She works on one of our morning shows, and she was in every day. I remember when Camille moved chairs because she used to sit here when I walked in, and then she moved there. She says hi to me every morning. I might not have had that kind of connection and relationship with her if it was a full newsroom. I know Camille intimately now. I know the work that she does in graphics. I know the work she's done to help other teams and when we have big events. She and I may not have had an opportunity to develop that relationship if we were at 100% in a full newsroom. So I would say, use this as an opportunity to connect. Use it as an opportunity to meet with your managers. Use it as an opportunity to stand out. We've got even over the course of the last 2 years, employees who, when it wasn't safe for everyone to be out or there were certain members of the team who couldn't come in, they stepped up. They went out in the field. They were doing more reporting than they would have gotten the opportunity to do. And now they're faces that you see every day. And so I think it's an opportunity. And if I'm early career, I take the opportunity.
Okay, we're going to transition now to streaming because we launched NBC News Now sort of at the peak of the pandemic. It's sort of taking off. Noah, I want you to talk to us about what NBC News Now is. What's the elevator pitch for streaming? We have an anonymous quote about one show. It's about Top Story. This person, I don't know who it is, said, Top Story is the greatest show ever produced in the history of broadcasting streaming, ever since they've invented a camera. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who said that, but thank you, whoever out there. No, what's the pitch? Because I hear it all the time. I don't get streaming. I already have cable. I have my local channels. I have my network news. Why do I need streaming?
Sure. Well, there's a lot wrapped up in that question. NBCU News Now is the streaming platform that delivers the best of NBC News journalism to folks for free on any platform of their choice. So stepping back, there you do have cable. Many people do not have cable anymore. There is a phenomenon called cord cutting that Mark and his team have been covering in depth. As folks cancel their cable subscriptions, or as folks simply shift their consumption habits to phones, to their desktop, to their tablets, they're increasingly looking for not only entertainment like they find on Netflix and Disney Plus or Peacock, but also news. And so as they look for news on streaming, that could be on YouTube, it could be on a Samsung Smart TV, it could simply be at NBCnews.com. NBC News Now is a 24/7 streaming platform that features both live rolling coverage of huge events in the world like the war in Ukraine, and then also programs like Top Story that curate that news and help people make sense of the world around them. So we made this bet back in 2019. We've seen enormous viewership spikes around every big breaking news event of the last couple years, whether it was the election in 20, January 6th and the insurrection, obviously the COVID pandemic, and now the war in Ukraine. Huge numbers of people, millions of people tuning into the product and watching news on streaming, watching News Now. And then every time those big breaking news events subside, the wonderful and encouraging thing is that viewership level sort of finds a new floor. More and more people like what they see for whatever reason. They find you appealing, and they come back every evening. It's baffling, but they come back every evening to watch your show. And it is in many ways our bet for the future, because more and more consumption of news is going to happen on that platform.
Rashida?
Can I give you an anecdote of where I think things are going? So this is not a full focus group. Sunday, the Grammys are on. My daughter says, I'm going to plug up the Verizon box so I can stream BTS's performance. I said, well, you're not streaming it. It's cable. You know, you're watching cable. And she was just kind of like, huh? Like, I thought everything was streaming. She's 13 years old. Like, the way people are consuming, and I think somebody said it really smartly in the piece, was their way on their time. And so as we think about what the future of this looks like, the platform is going to be less important. I think the content and the brand and what we all bring to the table is what they really care about, regardless of what box it comes out of.
And what I tell people is that it's not only another outlet for us to showcase all of our amazing work, it's also creating more jobs. And Patsy, I know you guys are also exploring more streaming opportunities with Noticias Telemundo.
Yeah, well, digital and streaming are two important areas of growth for us. 1 in 4 Americans under the age of 35 is Latino, and they're big content consumers across language and platforms. Telemundo is the #1 U.S. broadcast network on YouTube. That's in terms of subscribers. And that's regardless of language. We continue growing our digital app, and earlier this year, Telemundo announced T+, a new content hub on Peacock to serve the U.S. Hispanics, to serve what we call the 200%ers, those who are 100% Latino, 100% American. They speak 100% Spanish, 100% English.
Some of our biggest stories on Top Story, we just did a story on El Salvador and some of the unrest there. Within a day or two, it had 3 million hits, and it's still growing. So clearly, Patsy's right in that analysis. We have another question from our audience. Daniel asked, do you think it's important for aspiring journalists to have a specific niche they are interested in reporting on, or is it important to know how to report on a wide variety of stories? Mark, I'm actually going to start with you on this one. When you guys are looking to hire at CNBC, do you like people with sort of a jack of all trades, or do you like people that sort of have an expertise?
Well, this is a niche content set, so we're really about investing in money. And so what I would say is, if someone has the full compendium of skills and ambition and finds the content here interesting, that's good enough for me. This can be a little much for people who really are not interested in markets and economies and that kind of content on television. On our digital, more horizontal treatment of money content, there's a lot more reporting that's done on entrepreneurship, on personal finance and financial freedom. So it's a slightly more general look at money, but I think get the skills where you can get the skills. If someone wants to be a reporter, report. Go somewhere, report. If you want to be, tell your stories on video, find a way to tell them on video.
Rashida, do you need to be a political junkie to be hired at MSNBC?
Not at all. I mean, we cover a variety of stories. I think the most important thing, and I'll riff off of a little bit of what I heard here, is follow your passion. Like, what's the thing you actually care about? What's the thing you're really into? I think in this era, my answer might have been slightly different a few years ago. I think in this era where there are so many platforms, so many places where your content can live. I mean, if you just look at this news group here, I mean, we've got so many different ways to get that content out. The jobs will be there if it's something you actually care about, you're passionate about, you want to put your all into it, because it's not easy work. And so I think you really have to just be behind whatever the topic and whatever the focus is. There will be jobs in all areas.
Right. We have another question from our audience. Wendy asked the panel, what's the best advice you've received from a mentor as you rose through the ranks, and what's the best advice you have provided to one of your mentees? I want everyone to sort of think about this just a little bit to come up with a good answer. Anybody want to go first? Anybody got it? Rashida, you ready?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it a little bit earlier, which was go for the big thing. Best advice I've ever gotten in my career. It's one that I try to pass down. The other piece of advice I try to give to anyone who will listen is find someone for you to mentor. It doesn't matter if you're a PA. There are 100 people who want the PA job that you have. There are 100 people who look up to you at whatever level, on whatever level you're on. And so I think as much as you pour into this industry, as much as you pour into other people, you'll get the same in return.
Noah?
I think that's first of all, that's excellent advice. I think the second thing, I mean, my big thing is just do the work. I think a lot of people can get distracted by or preoccupied with, the office politics, the machinations of which job should I go for next and who do I need to butter up in order to get it. And I'm just a firm believer in forget about that. Don't worry about the cocktail party circuit. Do the work. And ultimately that's going to get rewarded in the end. And to go back for 1 second to what you're talking about skill sets of people, I think, there's two pieces of these jobs. There's the craft, right? There's the writing, the editing, the actual craft of reporting and storytelling. And then there is a substantive piece, right? There are areas of expertise that you can bring to the table. And I'll just say for me personally, I would say to folks, become an expert in something, right? Because if there's a lot of people coming in the door who say, oh, I know how to edit, I know how to, ask who, what, when, where, why. Yeah. But, there are fewer people who can come in the door and say, no, I've studied economics for 4 years. I can help you do all those economy stories. Or somebody who can come through the door and say, no, I have a real expertise in a certain aspect of political science or data science or something like that. And I think those people are going to have a leg up.
Patsy?
Well, I think the same thing, purpose and reason to do everything, and also keep on mentoring, become a mentor, give back. There's always someone beginning the same journey you just once did.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, what about you?
Yeah, well, maybe what I'll do is I think those three answers are spot on. As my career began to move along, and I moved into more of the management side of newsrooms and media generally, the advice was try to get A work out of people on their own scale, not A work on Rashida's scale or on Noah's scale, but on their scale. And if you can get folks, and that really is, how do you get the best out of people individually? And if you can weaponize everyone's best, you can rule the world.
Yeah, the best advice I ever got was actually while I was working at MSNBC on a show with a guy named Jerry Nachman, who, rest in peace, was an amazing news mind. Absolutely. And he told me the first rule of journalism and life: you don't ask, you don't get. And it's so true, whether you're working a story, whether you're in the workplace and you want an assignment, if you don't ask, you don't get. Sometimes you'll get a no, but a lot of times you'll get a yes.
Ambition is good.
Right, it is. We're going to wrap up now with final thoughts briefly. Remember, a lot of the people watching this are students, but also workers, people interested in working at NBC, Universal one day, and Telemundo. So what's some advice as we close out this panel?
Whether you're applying for your first MMJ job or moving up in an organization, keep learning, stay excited, and be ambitious.
Gosh, there's so many different areas I could go, but I think I would say in the spirit of this panel, I would say think about the company that you're working for. Work for a company that you're proud of. Work for a company that represents your values and your morals. Work for a company that has proof of pouring into its people and developing its people, because you're going to be so connected. So much of your life is going to be connected to that company on a day-to-day basis and throughout your career, that make sure it's one that you're proud of.
I'll be a little cheesy and I'll say ambition is good, but so is kindness. I mean, we've talked a lot about the importance of teamwork and collegiality and the familial atmosphere that Mark mentioned. Be kind to your colleagues and the folks who work for you and the folks you work with. I think that's critically important.
Patsy?
I think be true to yourself, be passionate, be dedicated, and serve your community. That's what we're here for.
And I will say, you know, finishing this off, that NBC News, NBC Universal, there are so many places to work, so many amazing outlets for journalism that it's really a gift to be able to work here. And it's a great place to grow, too. So even if you start one place, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be there forever. This has been an outstanding session. I want to again commend you all for coming and giving us all here a peek inside and really helping us out here, because it's great to hear from the people at the top as well. So many people out there are thinking about their path and where they're going to go into the future of news. Thank you all. I think I see Shep Smith out there. I think Shep Smith's entered the studio. So, Shep, Savannah, I'm going to send it back to you, and we're going to talk to Shep for a little bit, I think.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we'll be coming to Shep in just a minute. And how cool is that to get to see students actually asking these questions directly to our leaders? And if you in the audience have a question about applying for a job at NBCU, make sure you stick around for the career expos. Those are right after the fireside chat with Caesar coming up in a little bit. Now that you've heard from our leaders, though, it's time to send you to our breakout sessions. There are 3 sessions to choose from, and here they are once again. If you want some tricks of the trade for battling misinformation and disinformation on social media, you'll head into the discussion moderated by NBC's Gotti Schwartz. That will take place right here on the main stage, so don't go anywhere. Now, if you're a student or early career journalist looking to learn more about jobs and careers in the newsroom, you'll want to head into our Drive and Thrive panel. That's moderated, as you just heard, by CNBC's Shepard Smith. He's talking to a panel of NBC News Group insiders about their careers and how to break into the business. And if you're a seasoned vet and want to learn about next level leadership, choose the session moderated by MSNBC's Alicia Menendez. Now, to join a breakout session, you're going to click on the Stages icon on the left side of the screen. From there, select the session that you want to attend. And after those breakout sessions, you'll have a short break before Caesar's fireside chat at 1 p.m. Eastern, where students at both Montclair State University and Florida International University will be back to ask Caesar those questions live. There they are. They're ready to go. And I will see you right back here in just 1 hour. Enjoy.